good? How's my mouthing? Am I good at mouthing? Dead silent. All right. Welcome to Short Rest, where we talk about our shows. I think we're 4 or 5 strong now on our recurring campaigns. We have Pathfinder Second Edition, Scion, Star Wars, and now Static Dawn, which we're doing every other Monday, including this upcoming Monday. I'm excited to be here because as a GM, I think it's important to not only be proud about like your high moments, but also like ask yourself what caused them to happen. Because for a long time, it would be random chance that I managed to pull off a good game, and I couldn't ever recreate it. So I would like over-engineer some of my games, and they would just come out miserable, despite me thinking that they would be like incredible. I didn't introduce myself or my friend Daniel here, but myself is Ian. That's Daniel. We're talking about shows that I hope you watch anyway, so we don't need introductions. Or if this is the first thing you're watching, congratulations. You're going to hear like a lot of stuff that half makes sense. But I'm glad you're here anyway. We'll have a guest a bit later. How you been, Daniel?
I'm all right. I've just been struggling through these technical issues.
It's nothing.
Yeah, but luckily we have people that let us know what we need to do to make the small on the fly adjustments. Also, I was asked to give a shout out to Alex's booty. So yeah, there's that.
Okay. Yep. Prime shout out. Uh, um, I want you to talk a little bit, as much as you can, because I know there are players nearby, about your Scion game.
All right. So Scion. Both like the Bane and like my baby and all rolled into one. Like
Yeah.
I've had times when like I've been at work and I've had to stop everything just to write down like a scene or something that I had in my head. But
Right.
yeah, no, it's definitely taken on a life of its own, which I love. What are you doing?
I'm making a cocktail while you continue to speak. Thank you.
It's definitely just taking a life of its own, um, which I appreciate. I love like that the since it's a rules like game, the characters definitely just took the initiative. They took the story and they very much molded it to what they want to see um, it become, and I love
Yeah.
that because I can roll with the punches. I can push narrative, but I'm very light on the character arcs because they create them themselves. Like all I have to do is throw
Yep.
obstacles and then they either destroy them or walk around them.
Yeah. And as far as rules go, I mean, I'm not super familiar, but so far it seems like a more accurate way to describe it would be like rules medium or like a switch hitter of sorts, because you could follow every single rule and you could play it like it's D&D or Pathfinder, because there are enough rules in there. But then as far as the story goes, it sounds like the GM like really has to decide a lot of the more vital things. And the stuff you're given as a player that's powerful is about a relationship with the player and what they want to do in terms of growth as a character instead of like interacting with the world. So like with Pathfinder, um, the stuff you get is really a product of the change that you see in the world of Pathfinder or D&D. Like they present you with like, oh, here's this problem. You're uniquely tasked. You're uniquely capable of fixing it in some way. And then you change it, and then you're sort of rewarded for it. But in Scion, it's almost like you create a character and they ask you like, they don't really care what you do in the world. It's like, how do you want to change as a person? Like, what is your metamorphosis? Um, but then it happens like, apparently it happens like 3 or 4 times throughout play. Like you get, I mean, there are levels to it. And I think that's really interesting.
Oh, definitely. And like so one of the driving aspects that I like that like makes me love Scion is because it's very much like based in the the world of myth. Like it was like the way the rules read is that they want you to play through myths of legend, you know, as these scions and do things like that. And but you don't have to. You're not trapped into that box. You can completely do whatever you want. And I
Right.
like to focus on the characters' steps throughout the world, um, and their paths forward because in my experience, is very much um, it's very much the players who make the game. Like
Right.
it's always those inner relationships they make, like you know how they interact with each other. And like I was super lucky with our group, um, because Liam and Astrid uh, turned out to be twins, which that was
Yep.
amazing. I love it. Uh, and then on top of that, they both took care of Adrian after they all got their birthrights. Like Adrian's all messed up, her senses are all dialed up to like 20, and they came and rescued her, and then took her back to somewhere safe. Like that's like both character development because not even 2 weeks ago, Adrian had kidnapped Liam in the most like
Yeah.
crazy
Liam.
way.
Yeah, Liam didn't give a shit. 2 weeks prior. Yeah, that was a good. It was a. It was an unlikely friendship. Uh, and I almost feel bad because I put you in a position. Like every once in a while you start a game and all of the players have no chemistry, or almost actively like trying to resist forming a party, which is what the only thing you need as a GM is like these people to just stay in the same like mile radius, and they just don't want to. I almost feel like
Right.
I did that with you because Liam wasn't really a team player, but definitely seemed to work out by pure coincidence. This unknown to me when I made my character, I chose a pantheon and deity within the pantheon that was the exact same as one of my fellow players. Which I don't know if you count. How many deities do you think are in the Scion book?
Oh,
Easily over 100.
there's so many, and with each one they're planning on releasing, they're gonna release more and more of them. Like you get a new
Ugh,
pantheon pretty much with each one. Uh
that's
but
insane. When
you
did
can
when
pretty
did
much
Scion come out?
originally early 2000s, I believe. Like because the first edition, oh, I don't know. I have not done my research that well, but I believe it was early 2000s.
Right. What about second edition? Is that new?
Yeah, second edition, Origin and Hero just came out. I think within
Mm,
the last year or two.
gotcha. Okay, that explains it. Yeah, because the game seemed pretty new, like all things considered. It's super fun. We just finished episode 6,
Yeah.
I believe, and I came in on the third one. Um, and everything's changed for my character since then. Obviously, we stream that every other Friday. So
Yeah.
Fridays that aren't this Friday, you can expect episode 7 and further. Um,
um, but what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought.
you gonna kill my character or?
Oh, you know, I'd like to leave that up to fate. Uh,
Yeah. How difficult you make like when you plan an encounter, you
right.
first off, there's always a percent chance that someone's going to die in an encounter
Mm.
because of like how percentages work, whatever. Do you pay attention to it, or do you?
I do actually. I feel like if you don't pay attention to how close characters are to actually dying, it gets a little too plot armory. Like I don't
Yeah,
want I don't want the characters to think just because they're the PCs that they're invulnerable. Like no, and like the only time I've ever actually
hmm
fudged a roll was when Marina was in the Beastmaster's cage or area, and she blew her hand off. I rolled so much damage that she technically should have lost her arm and probably bled out on the floor.
Wow.
But like, because like it's the damage system is so weird in this. Like, um, it's once you make the successful shot or damage, then everything else that you get over top of it, you can like the points you usually spend to buy stunts and things like that, you can spend to like for a critical hit and things like that. But she had messed up so bad with all those ones that I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to see her die because she was such uh, a wild card, pretty much. Like she's the party wild
Yeah.
card, and I love not knowing that, like the chaos that
Yeah.
it brings.
And sometimes, yeah, it's not even about preserving a good plot, preventing a character from dying, but like there are situations where I know that if a character died, it would be the most meaningless death. It would be the most trivial, like Oregon Trail style death you could ever give somebody, and no one would walk out of it with the right kind of sadness. Like you could get a really somber moment killing somebody off
Oh yeah,
pretty much any time, but like sometimes you're just in a situation that's not the time to kill somebody. Not the, not the bad guy right before the boss battle, not like, like a will save from like jumping off like a rooftop after something. Like I don't know, you have to ask yourself if it's really like plot armor or just convenience, and retroactively like retconning how lethal a certain situation would be to begin
oh
with.
yeah,
Because sometimes the system, you look at the numbers and you're like, no, that doesn't make sense. That I reject that as a GM. I don't subscribe to that.
right. Like you don't you especially like the beginning of like a big battle. You never want to like with your big bad, you would never want to have them one hit kill the party right off the start. Because that's I feel like if you one hit kill your whole party right out of the gate, they don't even really get like they get
Right.
like one turn to react, and then
Mm-hmm.
you just kill them all. Like no, that's get out of here with that.
I would love to see. I would love to see a defense of someone making a TPK in the first session, because you talk about like funnel episodes or whatever, where it's designed so that the first session most characters die. I would be interested in seeing a game, where GM successfully pulled off killing every single character in a way that was meaningful. Because I see it just from like a rules perspective of like player versus GM, and it's
I
sort of like an arms race to see who's better at like figuring out
I
how to
I
win encounters.
I played in one game. It was a Dark Heresy game,
Yeah.
uh, which is like dystopian future, like 40K universe. If anybody doesn't really know, where our first episode, our first session, we all made these characters, and we came in and we got through the whole session. It was badass. It was full of action. It was full of like you almost died. He killed everybody at the end. Everybody, mercilessly, and like players got visibly upset because they had made connections in it. And then at the end, he was like, everybody wakes up in a tube. It was all a dream that the Inquisition was forcing into
Oh.
your head, and so
Ooh.
that was a way to do that, but bring it full circle to where they didn't actually die. Um, so it definitely had me feeling a certain type of way. I was about to walk out. I was like, I'm never
How
talking
long?
to you
How long
again.
ago was this? How long ago was this?
Uh, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. So I guess that sort of like belongs to the rule of, if something is memorable, it was probably pretty good. Because it's like a lot of, like, I think maybe the worst session you could make is just one that isn't memorable in any sense, and one that you've just forgotten the day after you played it, sort of thing.
Right.
So even the really bitter, really awful like an epic campaign that you actually lose to the guy in the end, or like you all die, or like everybody slowly like falls apart, like in Cult. If it's memorable and if you have done something that you still want to talk about 4 or 5 years later, yeah, maybe you're right. Even if it's
Right.
upsetting at the time, I don't know. Like that seems to be what's the judge of like a really good campaign is, because everybody has their crazy campaign from years ago that they still talk about. It's like, yeah, it was memorable. Even if you didn't have a lot of storytelling moment, like if you did things that were just genuinely worth talking about, um, a decade later, somebody did a good job
Oh,
with that
definitely.
with that game.
But so that brings a question up for me. In when you're running the game, because you said you're like the forever GM, right?
A
Like,
little bit, just a little bit, but I
so
don't
when
mind.
you
I like you
when you're
guys.
running a game, when does like would you um like you know how when we plot it out, like we have notes like kind of structuring where we want the setting to go. If the PCs get together and they start leading the the story in a way that you didn't plan for, would you sandbox what you had planned, or would you try to work those notes in like as plot points to where the PCs discovered at that point?
Oh yeah, so um, I have always sort of just like, yeah, if you think about like that problem where there's like three doors and you have to figure out like which one the goat is behind or whatever. For me, it's always about designing something very specific, something that when you create it, it's linear, because like randomly generated stories aren't as good as ones that authors write, and that's just been known. Like a book is better than the story you played in Skyrim with your character like running around doing radiant quests, whatever. Like making linear paths is a good narrative because you can use narrative tricks to tell a really good story. I just tuck it behind a curtain, and then wherever you decide to poke your head through, that's where I'll put it. So like I'll introduce an NPC that's supposed to be like a man, 30 years older in a different side of town, but just because you guys decided to break down the door on the south side of town, he is now actually instead the woman who's 20 years younger, who is actually on the other side of that door, because I have written something that I like, and it is going to turn out better than something I can improvise, even if I have to like sacrifice some of what I've already written. So
Right.
there were a lot of character relationships, and NPCs for Pathfinder that I just scrapped, or I like took two NPCs and I merged them together into one thing, or I had like a romance planned with an NPC and then just completely backtracked and changed it to some other like player altogether.
Right.
Much prefer it over um, improvising, because I just don't think there's quality um, in improvising the same way there is in planning out, like really fleshing out character details when you have time and you have like the right headspace.
Right. I gotcha. So my thing is like, especially with gods, like when I have to play a god, um, like I laugh it off and everything, like haha, this is what, like, yeah, no, I'm always in the mindset to play a god, but like really I'm in the back of my head, I'm like, oh shit, like someone's gonna get offended at this. I'm gonna be so messed. Like, and then I try to do
Yeah,
accents. Like, I really tried to do an accent for Ogma last game. I just couldn't. Like, I couldn't keep up with the
I
other's
didn't need
accent.
it. No, it really did it for me. The Ogma is just going to be whatever. I love that. That was fun. Um, well, let's say we talk about this Pathfinder then, because I'm starting to get into it. Let's talk about Static Dawn and Pathfinder. Maybe bring in our guest,
All right, yeah, absolutely. So
mayhaps.
we're gonna go on a short break real quick, and I'm going to go and collect our wonderful guest, and we'll be right back. So yeah.
Collect.
All right, and give me 1 second, guys. Give me 1 second, and don't speak just yet. I forgot to add in comms for this part. All right, you guys are good. You can hear each other.
Hello.
I can hear you guys.
Yay!
Hope we're not muted.
Yay!
The whole
Hello.
crew.
Yes, Chaos Crew.
About half the crew.
Yeah, you know.
Well, howdy.
Hi.
Hi, Spence.
How you doing?
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, hi. I'm Spence. I live here. Oh wait, since you did that thing, I'm gonna do this thing. Take my amaretto. You're drinking. I'm drinking. Damn
So
it.
we're getting saucy on stream tonight.
Hey, you know what?
I'm pretty sure the seltzer was expired, so it's just Diet Coke tonight.
All right. Well, I
Yep.
don't know that that's possible. Anyway.
Well, it sure tastes rancid. So
I
would
the
say
fact that you powered
yep.
through to this point is
Yeah.
really the kicker there.
Yeah.
Great.
I use my full trial.
So I'm Spence. What do I do again? I don't even remember,
Feel
chat. I am Monica Freerunner on the Pathfinder game. I am Saskia Perez on the Black Madonna game, and I am now the GM for the Static Dawn game. So yeah.
Yeah, before I hoard the conversation to talk about this obsession of my gnome obsession that is Pathfinder, I have to ask, what's your favorite thing about Static Dawn?
That I can bug the creator anytime I want.
That's pretty good.
But my favorite thing about Static Dawn is that the rules are easy to understand and adapt when I need to. And forgive me, I have a lot of traffic outside. And the chemistry between the three of you, it's like that. Like, I don't understand how this happened, how this magical thing happened, where I got three people that just gelled so
It went
well.
really well. Yeah.
I'm so excited, and I can't wait to bring Jen in.
For some reason, yeah. So there was a 45-minute period during play where every time I thought that the plot between our two characters should go a certain way, it did, and he just delivered.
Yeah.
So it was like, maybe we should know somebody, and he already dropped it. He said like, and I was like,
Kate.
you know what? I'm gonna drop a name, and and we just sort of played off of it, and it was like this weird improv, like almost whose line is it anyway kind of thing. Where we were just like, we were testing each other by throwing each other prompts that we just had to run with. And he said stuff, and I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, but I'm with it.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
I love that Blashy is throwing in what is current pop culture as history books right now. So he threw in Harry Potter as a okay, phone, shut up. As a historical text, and I was like, oh, I can use this as sensory information.
Yeah, no, that one's really good.
So I can't wait to see what else comes up. I was actually right before you said, oh, we're gonna bring Spence, and I was like, shit, I'm in the middle of making things for Monday's session. The cool thing about this game is that there's not a lot of research for me to do as far as game lore. The detriment is that I have to write my own, and so that's where I can make a B. Arthur, and I will put her somewhere. And I'll make her important so that whenever you come in, Sailor Taco Cat, Alex, that you can feel loved. I was going somewhere with that. So I have a website that a friend of mine developed for authors called Archivos, which basically allows you to put down all of your story elements, map them together, put images and links and everything all together. And I was like, I'm totally using this for my game. So I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, do you use this for role-playing games? He goes, all the time. Nobody else has asked me about it though. So
weird.
I'm really enjoying it. So like I've been making logos for the different companies that are big. I haven't done Dark Void Pizza yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
So funny. I love it. It's so far with just how little we've done. Yeah, it was a lot of development, and it's one of the things where I hope to match the energy next time I'm in.
Yeah.
And also, I notice we have a good amount of the Pathfinder cast in chat. So I'd like to ask a question.
So I had dinner tonight with my...
Anybody who would like to participate.
Okay.
What's your prediction for episode 22 and 23?
Oh.
Lay some oddball prediction.
All right.
And that way in a couple weeks we can reflect and see what has happened. See what's gone wrong.
So my prediction is that Salix and Reika will bring the giant back to where the rest of the army is, and the director is going to be the one to get the final blow.
Okay.
Because why? Monica thinks she's dead, so
yeah. Monica
So,
just kind of said goodbye to the world.
I'm pretty sure I'm dead, you know.
My prediction because we kind of split up into 4 different splinters. Like we left the director back with the main force of the army. Rune went up and did his own thing. Monica did her own thing, and then Will, Reika, and Salix are dealing with the monolithic
Aldonis
giant.
is also out.
Oh right, so 5.
Yep.
I haven't really been playing him as a character very much, just as
you
a
will
companion.
be.
Oh fuck.
Well, okay. Anyway, continue.
My prediction is nothing good. I feel like once we unravel more of Rune's story, like there'll be a large chunk that'll be like found out through the next few sessions because of the people that have arrested him. And then I feel like the director is going to have a key role in Salix and Reika and Will surviving, if they can survive that long. And then Monica, I'm really hoping they don't like kill her on the way over. They just, like, because they're taking her back and she's petrified. So
literally.
I mean,
Literally petrified.
unless we got somebody over there with a golden needle, Final Fantasy reference, to free her, then we're...
And then you got to break Rune out of jail.
Yeah. So. Oh, that's true.
Because Rune got arrested.
The director did fulfill his end of the letter agreement from Quintino Passandi.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not quite yet, because
you halfway finished it. You had to let him get arrested, and now you got to break him out, and then
that's what it said in the
then
poem.
You'll be done.
But is that something you have the means to do in the middle of all of this?
No.
Huh? Yeah, it's a lot of elves that arrested him, not just Diedrich. Also, I hope Rune doesn't drown to death. Whatever that was about.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
scratching my head like you guys.
Separate moving parts right now.
Yeah. And it's quite stressful, but oh man. This part is go ahead.
So it's frustrating because I don't know if anybody else does this, but like when I'm driving, I'm either replaying scenes from the game in my head or trying to figure out what it's going to be like for my characters when they wake up, or what kind of dream sequence they're going to be in while they're unconscious. And so right now, unconscious Monica is having conversations with Blamish 2, who's just going, WTF, I just empowered you, and then you go get wrecked? What the hell? So yeah.
No, I mean, I've definitely had like the little like daydreaming moments, I guess, where like you're just kind of like driving and like to that song that when I like found the Rock Nardin song.
Mm-hmm.
When I heard that, I just had this vision of like just horrible things happening, and just I can't describe it in full detail because
it's the end of Infinity War, essentially.
Yeah, like everything's coming to the climax right now, and the culmination of so
and
much.
Everything is falling apart.
And I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
There's so much to look forward to every session, and like,
yeah, there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of buildup. And it's just one of those things, like because I do remember at the end of a book 4 of my last campaign, I had a situation like this, but what happened is I over engineered the final session where everything was supposed to come to a head like this, and it just blew up. Because there's tension where it's a good thing, and there's tension where it's just a mess. You can make a session where there's supposed to be a lot going on and it's just stupid, and it's just like a billion things happening, and all the players are like, I don't know what any of this means to me, but I guess I'm here for it. And it's sort of like it's hard to make sure that all of the players end up in the path of least resistance, so that when things are in motion, it has to be through them, instead of sort of making you all like spectators in this like weird interactive story that I'm telling. But you guys definitely did it. You managed to each find your way into like one wing of what's going on, and everybody is like basically on the map. If you can see it, there's very little territory that I could control without the players noticing. So mostly it's a matter of planning things so that way everything I can do can foreshadow to the other groups that are splintered off, like what is about to happen. And that's what I did with Rune, like seeing this army of Sabasons. That's not for him. That's definitely for the people planning to go to war. But I don't want to get into that anymore, actually. I'm quite happy with where it is right now.
So what questions do you have for me starting this new game, since you're my player?
Well, first, how much so planning forward, how much of it is planned to be improv, and then planning, like thinking about last session, how much of it ended up being improv compared to how much you thought? Like how much of it was just like, oh, I'm just gonna wing it?
The only thing that I had fully planned out was the scene in the cave with the tree.
Oh, really?
That was it.
Wow.
That was the only thing I planned. Everything else, I was just like, nah, I'll figure it out.
That's insane, because there was a lot of detail, despite like I'm not good at coming up with details on the fly for settings. So if somebody has to bring a location, like a location in particular, if someone has to bring in a location that I wasn't planning for, it's extremely stressful for me to like come up with something, because I don't know. And there's this like weird thing where it's almost like hearing yourself talk, like that echo in your ear, like when you're trying to come up with something and then you think there's something wrong with it, so you're hesitant to say it, and then like sort of doing that instead of actually describing the scene. So you're left with being like, and you're in a tavern. I'm not going to tell you anything else about the tavern because I'm afraid of plot holes.
Well, one of the things was I was noticing that Blashy was really quiet, and so I wanted to make this encounter something where he could show a lot more of his abilities and his smarts and the reason why he's a part of the group. And then you failed. So I was like, great, I can get JoJo to do some stuff and be like super into finding things and being curious. And I loved how he was stealing stuff from this wrecked mine entrance.
Oh,
But yeah, I'm very much I've always been a fly from the seat of my pants kind of GM, and that's why I did a lot of one shots. So this is my first campaign. So now I have to go back and rewatch the episode to take down all those little things that I wrote about, because you're obviously going to hook on to something that I kind of threw in there just for flavor and be like,
yep.
okay, I need to like make sure that I bring that back at some point, or be ready to.
So,
Yeah.
referring back to something Spence said earlier, like, have you ever done that, Ian? Have you ever like tailored made a situation to one of your players so they could shine for a little bit? Just
Yeah, that's so that's usually the session where they can't make it. And so like that's my main fear. Is they're like, yeah, it's not I can't come in today. And it's like, this is respectable. Shit, what do I do? Yeah, I have individually, there are episodes where I decide to make it as much character progression as possible for one character in particular, and then sort of make them pay for it later on, or like make them humble again later on, but sort of give everybody a chance. Like with the director, it was the episode after the Taking Back the Citadel, where there was a performance with a play. He was the
I
star of the
remember
show.
that one.
He ran the whole thing. I put a million stressful situations. Like the stage was like rigged and it fell apart, and it was like, okay, well, you're being sabotaged actively right now. Thinking everything's going to be a disaster.
And then Rune came and saved the day with his little miniature stage.
Yeah, and then like people practically carried him away. There was like and then there was like a bunch of other stuff I'm not gonna get into, but it was just like supposed to be a fan service to one character. And then like later I built off of each of those things as sort of a reminder of like, yeah, be humble. You have a lot of character growth to do still. you haven't peaked yet, so keep at it. And then another
Alex
thing
is in chat and going, "Aw."
Another thing is I like to, I'm sure you've all realized this, I like to like 5 days early just message the player and say, hey, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'll tell you roughly when, but you should start preparing for it. So like for say,
is that when you start asking a lot of questions?
Or well, I just say like expect a scene like this, so that way you have 5 days of doing exactly what you do in the car or in the shower, which is just thinking about what you do. I went to Daniel. I said, hey, look, Salix is going to have a torture scene. Make it pretty flavorful. Think about what you would do in this situation, because if you had 10 seconds to think, it's going to come out okay, decent.
And then we had to cut most of all of it.
Exactly. So like, when you have 5 days, you it's like you're writing it all of a sudden, but you don't. It's not even a short story. You only have to write a page, so it ends up being pretty quality stuff when you can really refine like how your character would act in the situation.
Right.
But yeah, Salix took it. Salix ran with it.
I'm trying to think. I don't think you've done that with Monica yet. So
I did it with Monica about food. Because so like in a tavern, that was my biggest problem, is that when you're improving, it's really bland, where I'm like, oh, this time you're eating turkey. Like, okay, guys, calm down. So like, yeah, that's why I wanted to be like, hey, think about what you'd make.
And my responses were like immediate. Okay, hang on. I know exactly what I would make. Let me get my recipe books, because I used to play in the Society for Creative Anachronisms, and there is historical cooking. And I have a ton of those cookbooks at my house.
Yeah, no, and it really showed. And I did the same thing for, I think I've done the same thing for everybody. I definitely did it for the director about the play. I said, think about what is going to happen in the play. because you don't want 8 seconds ahead of time to know. You kind of want to like have a little bit of time to breathe
Mhm.
and to think about it. I know I did it for Rune at some point.
Right. Well, I mean, it's something. It's especially for like game changing scenes like that, like something that could affect how the party sees your character and things like that. It's nice to have the heads up that you'll be put in that kind of situation to get in your character's headspace, because
Yeah.
a lot of times like when there's a lull or during the game or something, or when someone else is doing something, like you kind of just fall out, and like I'll daydream all the time. I'm like, then you're like, hey, Salix is doing what? I'm like, oh, what now?
Yep.
Yeah, he's gonna hit it with a sword.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I've had that. One thing in particular I kept from a player, despite it being a pivotal moment, was the big plot twist with Reka and Garsat um, up at the ruins. I genuinely didn't know how Reka or Jen would respond to that situation. It was really anybody's guess because Reka would be excused if she decided like screw the Akuje, kill them all kind of thing. Because they genuinely did something that's pretty messed up. You would understand Reika's place. I didn't know if Reika was going to just side with Garsat and say, "Hey, bye everybody. I'm gonna go do the revenge thing," because I didn't know. I guess I didn't know enough about Reika's character, like deep down. Um, so I was actually genuinely surprised when Jen was like, "All right, let's go forgive these guys." Okay, all right. I wouldn't have. I would start murdering things, but I'm not that strong, I guess.
Right, and I feel
Is
like for Reika's like personal arc, that was a big changing moment for her, like because this is the same character that had ripped the head off of like uh, the one of the Cinder Claws, like at the Citadel, and put it on
Mhm.
the end of her like a pike, like.
yeah,
And then so she goes from
yeah,
that to, you know what, the people who committed genocide against my people, we're gonna forgive them. And I was like,
Well,
oh, like that.
see,
All
to
right.
me, that is actually quite in Reika's moral compass, because she doesn't believe the bit about darkness within her people, and she told Garsat outright, I'm not going to follow the darkness. I can't follow Dahak, no matter what my people supposedly did. So I'm going to research this and figure out what I want to do, but I'm not going with you. So she never really was like, I'm
yeah,
going to get forgiveness. She hasn't actually forgiven them, but she
right,
knows that she can't ally herself with the darkness and in good conscience. So
yeah,
I think that while that was a very difficult um, decision, I think it was right on par with what she does. And I loved that she wanted to talk to Monica about it, and I was very confused as to why. And then I remembered that 2 episodes before, Monica had the same conversation on the opposite side with Reika about her having Dahak's uh, symbol.
yeah. Um, I feel as though I have tested the morality of all of my players. A solid, like one good time for each player,
Mhm.
except for the director, because the director would never change, even for good. I couldn't, like I couldn't get that gnome to take out the trash. I can't make him evil. It's not gonna happen. It's not like really like no. But
Well, evil is in the eye of the beholder.
yeah, and it's so that sort of brings me to Monica because
Hmm.
Monica uh, is kind of my recent test. Um,
Yeah.
what I'll start with Daniel. What do you think about characters that aren't evil that worship evil deities, or characters that are evil that are in good parties? Like,
All
is it
right.
is it is it spelling doom or can it work?
It can work because it really depends on how the person plays the character. Because I feel like we had this conversation with Mr. Smith at some point where he kind of like he put it into perspective for me. He said, like they have like tendency I forget what I said. Pretty much like psychotic tendencies. Like they're not just doing evil for the sake of evil. They're more inclined for it though, you know,
Right.
like they won't shy away from like that someone's dying on the street, they'll probably most likely walk by, but they're not gonna like, oh, let me stab them because why not? But again,
Yeah, but
it all depends on the player.
yep. Well, that brings me to evil deities in being worshipped by good players, because good and evil in Pathfinder transcends the weird muddy like ethical and moral like argument that you could make about these things, and people do, because it's a spectrum of energy,
Right.
and there are outer beings that are good and evil, because it's the positive and negative energy. um, so it's a very real and tangible thing. There can be good people who use energy which will be objectively recognized as evil, in Pathfinder. So it's interesting to see what would happen if somebody who does consider themselves genuinely good, um, to suddenly like a detect evil spell is like, yeah, that guy's evil. He that is a bad person. Um, how
So
would you
like
feel if
my thing
like
is
if
like
you
I'm sorry, go ahead.
if you were to, let's say you're a paladin, Salix was a paladin, you cast detect evil, and one of the members in your party is just radiating evil energy, despite like if you really think about it, they haven't done anything that you would see as wrong. So stopping them now might be against the greater good. What'd you
I
do?
I feel like it it wouldn't really. I guess if the paladin I'm playing is like has to like take out evil where he sees it, like that goes against his tenets. Like he had like that he lives by that code, so he has to do something. But if I'm playing like Salix, who is just a regular fighter, who, I mean, he has ties to deities, but he's not bound to their code or in any way.
Right.
If like Monica all of a sudden is worshiping what is his name,
Lamash
Mendikar
2.
or
Lamash 2.
Lamish too,
Yeah.
um, like Salix doesn't make a difference to him either way.
Right.
Like yeah, like you could worship good or you could worship evil. If your purpose is the same, at the end of the day, who the hell cares?
Yeah, Mr. Smith says each follower of a deity has agency concerning how they enact the will of the god, which is important to note. Yeah, the contracts aren't that strict. They're still pretty loose, and usually you have like a leeway of about one step on the alignment axis, but there's also an implied contract. So if you knew somebody who's worshiping, let's say, Asmodeus for 20 years, if you haven't fallen out of favor yet, you've probably done some messed up stuff. So in order to stay in and I guess there's a difference between the non-divine caster. Like if you're not a cleric, if you are a fighter and you worship an evil deity, maybe it's a side project for you. Maybe it's not a huge thing. But
I just
yeah, if you're
dabble
a
in evil.
paladin or if you're a champion or a cleric of that evil deity, yeah, you've done some stuff. You have adhered to a contract that makes you probably do some pretty sinister things. Um, yeah, this stuff with Lamash too is quite interesting, though.
So, I mean, the thought of good and evil as far as Monica is concerned is that the the good are the ones um who have created that scale. Who creates the scale of what is good and what is evil, you know? Um
Right.
and so she's experienced a great deal of good from enacting these actions of supporting creatures that are monstrous and being abused. So she's of that opinion that the scale of good and evil is weighted incorrectly and is not balanced. So she doesn't believe she's good or evil. She's just doing what feels right.
Right. Yeah, and the way I see it, the Jedi are evil. So
I'm sorry. What did you just say?
oh no. I think Salix is the high ground right now. I can't.
I always have the
Yeah.
high ground.
And then it ends up always just being that thing. It's like it's been 50,000 years of civilization, and it's still largely questions that we can't answer ourselves. So there comes a point where you're like, there are questions we'll never be able to like really answer in the context of morality, outside or in a tabletop RPG. I'm just along for the ride, guys. The trials that a deity brings will make or break, but I think mostly break a character. Like there's like a lot of power to be had, especially if you're a class that uses it. But if you're not a class that benefits from a deity, it's mostly just a profound amount of character growth, I think.
Right.
And a lot of sacrifice that goes into it because there are things you have to do. And the rewards are few and far between. So I think it's like, it's sort of like people taking voluntary disadvantages in Pathfinder First Edition. It just makes for a really, really well-built character to
Right.
take that upon themselves and all of the restrictions that come with it.
So, like, when it comes to like flaws and things like that, like throwback to like LARP, I always say like the best part of making a character is the flaws you get to put on them, because it's not the merits or the powers that you or abilities you can have on them and everything else like that make the character. It's the flaws. Like it's each flaw describes something that this character has went through, or it culminates all together fully to make this character like from just a person or idea into an actual person that you can get into the mindset of. And yeah, the more flaws a character has, the easier it is for me to play them personally.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to start.
So
I can't wait.
a different question for each of you. What music do you listen to when you're writing for your game?
I listen to music with no lyrics at all. So rock Norton, like electronica, just any orchestra music, like anything that just will set an ambient tone and like have a journey along itself. Because each like Rock Nardin has a song called "The Devil," and it just has this like slow lead in, and then it reaches a fevered pitch, and then it slowly lays down. So it's like a perfect like fight arc. And then you listen to it, so you write out your notes of like what happens at the beginning, you get to your climax, and then you tone it down, and then you're like, all right, well, now I need something for a come down. So you look up like, yeah, it's definitely music that allows me to concentrate is ones without lyrics.
So to be honest, I realize that I do my best writing when I'm just in complete silence. Like the music is great. The music feels great. It's the best feeling writing. But my phone broke like 2 weeks ago, and I didn't have it I had to like water the lawn like an hour a day. And I would just stand out there, and I realized that I did my best writing, my most productive and detailed and serious writing was when I had just nothing. I had no music. I had no background noise. I couldn't even check my phone. I was just standing out there with a piece of paper and a pen, and I came up with basically the entirety of episode 21. It was just like me sitting there, like coming up with ideas. Um, I would seriously recommend just trying to write the closest thing to an absolute vacuum, because it's kind of like it's like an extended shower thought sort of thing where you have like very little stimulation. Creativity, it takes a long time and it is agonizing, but then eventually it just clicks, and it's just like a fire hose of ideas. I actually, episode 21, 22, and 23, it was all from this period where I like didn't have my phone, my computer wasn't even really working, so I just had piece of paper to pen, lock myself in my room. It sucks, but then at the end, it's apparently a good story, so I'm gonna try it again.
Go out and water your lawn, Ian.
So I really need to start carrying my handheld recorder with me and put it on when I'm in the car, because I get my best ideas while I'm driving, and then I can't write them down because I'm driving. So I feel like I should have my recorder in the car, hit record as soon as I get an idea, and just be like da 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 da, and it's super easy to stop it. I just have to find it again.
I've woken up out of like a dead sleep, grabbed my phone and jotted down a note to like
Yep.
about a game, and then like falling asleep, woken up like, have Ogma rip her face off. What? What is going on?
Yeah,
No more jalapenos before bed.
definitely done that.
So Alex asked, what future games do you guys want to play / run?
Pathfinder 7th edition is definitely on my list, because they're just gonna keep cranking those bad boys out.
Well, let me know, because I'll be up for that campaign too.
I think I plan on running a Pathfinder game every week between now and the Sunday before my funeral, because genuinely I have tried many games now, and I don't think I enjoy any games more than I enjoy a long form epic fantasy. Genuinely, it's just a very different experience. And it's just something we take for granted because we have so much of it. We have an overabundance. But if it were to disappear and we had just sort of the other tabletop games left, we would feel seriously lacking. Like, I know a lot of people say that they're kind of sick of the format, the D20 base, whatever. It's seriously entertaining for a very long time.
I was, before I decided to go with Static Dawn, I was going to be doing a campaign of hot guys making out for the alternate Mondays, because I hadn't done it before, and then I realized I'd have to do a lot of research about 1920s 1930s Spain, and that did not sound like fun. So I went with the game that I get to completely pull out of my ass, and yeah, and I started writing a blog about it.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome.
For me, there's so many games I really want to run and play. I have all of Invisible Sun here, and I really wish that I could figure out a way to run that on stream, because it's such an in-depth world, and it's so beautifully written and just well done, and so much information and lore. I wouldn't mind playing that, but I really want to play, like, run a World of Darkness game. Like, every Saturday I play in a Changeling game with my friends in person, and it's just a roller coaster. Like, the things you can do in the game, and like, again, it's like Invisible Sun. There's books for everything. Like, you can make a vampire, you can do a changeling, you can play a regular mortal who is like a witch. Like, you can just go off the walls with this thing. And for someone that loves like fantasy based like kind of realities, but like grounded in real world with real world like consequences and things to kind of like put into perspective, that is the best. Like, so yeah.
I played Mage the Awakening, and I made I made my character a techno witch,
I
which
love
was
mage.
great. I based it off of this character, Satsuki from the Animation X remix or X 1999, something like that. And so basically she could hack into any computer. Guess what's computerized? Cars.
I
GTA.
Yeah.
I've never played a mage game or like had mages like heavily involved in any of the games that I've played in, but I really want to. Mage is like the top.
Mr. Smith sounds like he's down.
Well,
between the top tiers of anything you can be in World of Darkness, mage is right there. Like mage takes you into godhood, like real quick. Vampire, yeah, you can be around, you can be ancient, and you can do some crazy stuff. But mage, you want to burn a whole town down in like one blinding flash of light. That's gotcha.
It's pretty good. They're yelling Geist. He's yelling Geist in the chat. I don't know what Geist is.
I don't know the
Geist
context.
is it has to do with World of Darkness. I'm rusty on it, but it's something, Mr. Smith. I know it involves World of Darkness. But yeah, there's so many things. Like you can be a Promethean, which is practically like Frankenstein. They're crazy. Yeah. Anyway, off of that tangent, circling back.
It's weird to see the systems that start off with like just a small book, and then just 2 bookshelves worth of splat books and supplementary content is just really where it thrives as a system. Like you couldn't explain Pathfinder First Edition without the context that is the amount of content that came out in the entire 10 years after it was first released. And it sounds like that's very much one of those systems where by itself in the initial release, you don't have the big picture because you don't know the amount, like most of the preferred things in the game are just from books all over the place.
So the original World of Darkness book is like a book like that thick. And like you get the basic rules. Like you can run a mortal game off of that one book and you can do some crazy stuff with it. But where it gets crazy is like when you get the Changeling book, which is like that thick, and then you get the Vampire book, which is another one, and the Werewolf, and then like you get all the subset of books of that, and then it's so crazy on the amount of resources they put into it, and now it's just like it's just this wealth of knowledge that's out there. Just it's amazing. But anyway, sorry. I did have a question for you, Ian, about Pathfinder.
Oh boy. Yeah, go ahead.
So with Pathfinder, like I remember before I played in your game, I played in another one of my friend's games, just one time, but they set me down with a computer program, and they had a metric fuck ton of drop-down menus that just you would pick one thing and keep going, like for armor and race and class and things like that. And I ended up being like an elven gunslinger. And like, is that the amount of stuff they have available in 2E as well?
So Pathfinder First Edition was a literal decade of content being
right.
made. 2E sort of already is starting to catch up to the amount of content. It's done away with many redundancies. So now that they look at the body of content in First Edition, they can spot patterns where things are sort of repeated. So like, oh, well, you can play a divine class, but you take an archetype, so they use arcane magic. And then there's vice versa. And it's like, well, why don't we just make it less crunchy and then also sort of reduce the clutter of stuff. Also, there's another thing. First edition is super crunchy. It's extremely crunchy. That being said, when you're playing a crunchy game, any character building choices that you have that are really underpowered are basically unplayable, because you're playing a game where your output really matters and what you can roll really matters. So when you have a character whose abilities are super situational or just genuinely weaker than other options, it's an unplayed, abandoned character option. So there were literally hundreds of feats and traits that people would go on boards and say, if you use this, you're objectively wrong. So there was just so much in it that was dead to power creep effectively. um, Tui is not like that. I don't know that people still make those kinds of arguments about certain builds in second edition, but I'm certainly not feeling that among the party, and I would definitely feel it by now if it was first edition. I would be able to tell. I would be able to rank every player in terms of combat capabilities easily if it were first edition, because the space between each player is just so insane.
Well, I
But
mean,
yeah,
we
but
all
in
know that
second edition,
the director is the best for combat, so we're just gonna put him on the front
oh
lines
yeah,
going
And well,
forward.
100%.
he's scared of combat, but he's actually really good at it. Monica, on the other hand, is not.
Yeah, this is the part where you find out that he's actually a time traveler, and he just
Yeah.
avoids combat by going back in time and
Oh,
preventing it.
so instead of the doctor, it's the director. Is that what we're dealing with?
Yes,
Okay.
what? We don't know his name.
So
I don't know.
the
Okay, that's
director is a
actually
time lord, so there we go.
didn't even think about that until now. That's perfect. I like it.
This reincarnation just made him short.
See, I thought he had a big heart. He just had two. That's so cute. Love it.
One is just rotted away from cirrhosis.
Jeez, yeah, it's a good backup heart. Yeah, it gets the other one going. Yeah, so
That's
I
why
don't
he
know
can drink so much coffee.
I don't know how long it's been with second edition, but I am in love with second edition so far. Um, I would go back. I expect to go back and forth because I do love Pathfinder first edition dearly. It was my first system, but um, second edition just it it is a book for playing a game the way I would GM a game. So I don't even know if I would love it as a player, but certainly it's how I play as a GM. And the way that they tell you to play in the adventure paths is totally how I play as a GM. They will flesh out as much as I need, and then they tell me to just sort of just run with it. And they provide characters um, all the time. Like the most important resource to me is just that it gives me NPCs that are interesting. Um, because there's a lot of content that I had to remove from APs, and a lot of content I had to put together. But because of the way that they control the general narrative, you guys actually haven't derailed the campaign at all, even a little bit. You've been very much like 100% on task. Um, I just love APs, guys. I'm here for Pathfinder and Fantasy Grounds.
No,
I
love it. It's definitely been one of my favorite campaigns. Like last week, I had my that was my busy week for all my games. I'd had Scion, then I had my Changeling game on Saturday.
Chef Kiss.
Then I had Pathfinder, and then I had Star Wars on Monday. So 4 games all in a row, back to back to back, and the only one up to Pathfinder that I could like really think about, like even my own game, I was just Pathfinder. It's like I just want to know what happens in this session. Like I need to know.
So if I ever show up to Pathfinder looking extremely harried, it's because Sundays are actually my busy days, because I start off at 2 in the afternoon with my Dungeons and Dragons game. Then I have to get ready for my Nostalgia Pilots Gundam podcast. So I have to watch the episode twice, make all my notes, and record. And then I come to Pathfinder. So those are my Sundays.
Oh, that's
So if I'm eating during stream, that's why.
yeah, that's a lot. I don't know how people can do more than one game in a day. Because Pathfinder just gets me wired. I'm just I feel like I fell asleep in like a toaster or something. I'm just done. Yeah, it takes everything out of me in the best way. It's not like I'm not like coming up like I hate this thing, obviously, but yeah, no, it's such a good time. Um,
So,
and-
when it
so
comes
we're
to
like,
like
go ahead.
rewards, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
When it comes to rewards for your games, um, like Scion does experience, but it does like the ones to the experiences that you get. Uh, with Pathfinder, we do it milestoned. Now I remember like the Pathfinder that we played, like the first edition that I played. It was very much like based. You killed something, you got cool loot, and then you got to show your cool loot off and wear it and do cool stuff and take the hordes of gold that you found to buy stuff. Um, like other than like just great overarching story that you put into the game, like how do you like reward your players usually?
Mm, I don't even know how to answer because I don't know the secret sauce. There's not like a formula I'm applying. It's just sort of there's just when I transition from being the person who hands out loot and experience to being the person that handed out like really good story beats, I don't know what I did. It's just that like I ended up being too busy to hand out loot in game because of the amount of stuff that we had going on in sessions at the same time that like good character development was happening. It sort of just faded out. Like I started giving out less and less treasure. Treasure stopped being like the cool twist at the end, because it's not a good cliffhanger. It's like the opposite of a cliffhanger. It's like,
Right.
oh, and now you're safely on the ground. The end. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I can come back next week. Like I'm safe now. I don't know. Maybe I should just save and exit. You know what I mean? But yeah, like it slowly started being. I don't have time to give equipment to the players because they're currently in the middle of like a crisis.
That's what
And then
our
it,
2 week downtimes are for.
yeah, but then like those, but then ending off on those plot twists was just way nicer. It was just so much more entertaining,
Right.
especially with the amount of time that we have. We have like between 2 and 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours for a session. So there isn't that time to like go into town and go back and forth about like haggling items for 30 minutes.
And
It's more about
it never feels that long. It feels like we get to the end of something and then you're like, and that's the session. And we're like,
yeah.
what time is, oh my God, it's almost midnight. What the hell?
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
So,
Yeah, I blink and it's 11, and I'm like, oh no, I gotta
yeah,
wrap everything up. How am I
yeah.
gonna tie this all in? And then another thing is Pathfinder also has a lot of um, they have rules in the game mastery guide. They have what are called relics. Basically, what it is instead of giving players equipment using gold, you give them things that are tangible things that have powers that the player can choose. I did this with Rune. I gave him a relic, which was based on this thing that's living in his mind, and he has chosen abilities based on it instead of equipment. And it has a gold equivalent, so I know roughly how much it should be worth. Um, and also another thing I did with Salix, I don't know if I even mentioned this to anybody else, but his arm, that thing that happened to him, was my way of giving him a weapon augmentation, which was the thundering enchantment that you can give an item. I was like, how about I just give him it instead of like, I don't know. It's always been weird to be like, and the monster dies and like equipment falls out. Like he's a treasure pinata. Because then like even from a story perspective, it doesn't always make a lot of sense. It's just something we sort of pretend makes sense and sort of seems okay. But from like a strict plot perspective, um, a lot of the abilities that equipments grants, you should make coming from within, essentially. Like as lame as that sounds, like the power should be coming from whatever source you need it to. And in this
And
case, it was Gosray and well also Rune. So there were connections there that I couldn't do if I just said, oh, and like a stone falls out of this guy's pocket. Like that's nothing. You're a burglar now.
but all of us to have like these little things in our that we've taken and accumulated um, over the experience, and some of which we even started with. So like me and Reika both having similar necklaces, they may just not be activated yet and have to be activated by a certain thing.
Right.
Or taking something from a magical beast uh that we've killed, something mundane, and then realizing, oh, if we augment it this way, then poof, it can become something really invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. Augmentations are going to be kind of how you all get rewards
Stacked on.
in Static Dawn too. Basically, everybody has augmentations, and you can get more with cash and with finding the right people to do the augmentation surgery. Um, but the problem is that the more augmentations you have, the greater the chance for a mutation, which in itself is both a reward and a risk, kind of like wild magic or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what happens when we get into the mutations and how those take shape with you, because you each have very different augmentations right now because you have very different backgrounds.
Yep.
So I'm excited to see what you all choose to get as you get more money, but also how that's going to affect your character and your character's psyche. And I am looking forward to seeing how your morality shifts over the course of the campaign, because you've already taken a very strong stance against old world stuff. Alfarius
Yeah.
is like, but it's beautiful. And then um uh Brian is kind of in the middle. He's like,
Yep.
but it's cool.
Yeah. That was a conflict I wanted to force. Another
Great.
interesting thing about augmentations for Static Dawn is for every category of augmentation, for every body part, the first thing on the list is just replacing the normal part, which is pretty ominous. Where it's kind of like those systems, sort of like Cult, where you slowly just lose body parts and like you're slowly being broken down, but then you replace it. So instead of a permanent injury, you just sort of gain corruption and become greedier because you need to like
Yeah,
finance the thing. But I'm interested to see how it plays out long term,
me
like
too.
managing several replacements. Ooh.
And also if we get to the point of doing a hard reset, your SIM card can be transferred to a synthetic.
Mm. Hmm.
So that's a thing that we may or may not have to deal with.
That's intense.
It's very altered carbon. I love it.
Mm. Yeah. How do you view how closely knit do you think the individual segments, the individual sessions are to like a larger narrative?
I think, well, okay, so I will admit that I am see you later, Alex. Sailor Talk with Cat. Um so I will admit that the premise that I'm working on comes out of a couple of the books that I've recently edited. I did the audio editing for the audiobook.
Yep.
And so it is tied to current world states and what may or what hypothetically could happen in our future if things remained unchanged, so it's, or if it takes a turn in one way or another, things could end up being this way or that way, and just scaling it down to this one city state. Yeah. I'm influenced by the influence of the current state of the world and my own imagination, thinking, okay, well, how would these people in charge adapt? And what would their ideal be? And then what would the people who make it happen, how would they corrupt it?
Right.
And then what would the end goal be? Because the people who have the big philosophical ideas will eventually die. So what happens when somebody else takes over?
Yeah, and it's with sci-fi, you always end up with like really, really large scope questions that are just impossible to answer, but always like begging for an answer, and yeah, like that dystopian feel. It can be overwhelming at times.
It can be, and so like I have very big thoughts about, okay, well, here's what the idea was, this is where we started, but then so and so came along, and then so and so came along, and then this person died, and so then this person took over and was easily swayed by X person. And so I've got all of those big ideas without names up in here, and what I trickle down to is, okay, so now we're 200 years later, what does that look like?
Right. Yeah. And the most important step is where it connects to the players, because you can have an excellent game where nothing was planned that high up, and you can have the reverse. And I certainly, for the most part, because of the amount of lore in Pathfinder, I couldn't tell you the creation myth. I couldn't tell you what happened in the very beginning. I just know what's happening at the thin layer right above the players' heads. But then beyond that, like the politics and the history and the timeline of Galarian is completely lost on me, and somehow works. So
yeah. So if there's anybody who's not in my game who wants to help me talk through things, because I have a lot of big ideas and I want to share them with someone, but I don't want to ruin the experience for my players, please message me. Otherwise, I'm going to bug poor Ian to death.
Yo, I'm right here.
Okay.
Speaking of GMing and prepping, I think the last thing I want to talk about tonight is a realization I had that's based on the format of catering to players, the cast, versus presenting something that flows to an audience of any sort, whether it's just the person who like sits in and watches a game as a cameo, or somebody who actually watches a campaign or watches a stream or like listens to a podcast. And that's sort of the difference between what is a saga and a show where you start from the beginning and you continually build off, and basically a sitcom. Because if you think about the way that sitcoms are designed, I can go turn on Big Bang Theory if I for some reason wanted to do that, and I could watch an episode from the middle, and it would all basically make sense to me, because it's laid out in a way that you have to introduce the characters at any given point. You don't assume, you're not building off of something that happened like years prior. So there's entertainment even when you start sort of from the center. The big, like a sitcom isn't going to tell you to start from the beginning, or else nothing is going to make sense. But a mystery show definitely will. I noticed that Pathfinder is naturally always, for the most part, going to be something like a saga. There's just stuff you're not going to understand unless you really start from the beginning, or really make the party stop to explain everything that's happened leading up. But then there are systems such as Scion, or like really rules light systems I've noticed, where it sort of feels like a sitcom. Because Scion, I can start at episode 7, and the way that everything is built, it's based on personal character progression. So as long as the person watching knows where the character begins and ends, it sort of has a flow to it. Daniel, would you agree?
Oh, definitely. And that's part of like how I plan the game. There's definitely ways that you could like probably do. So I look at when I'm building Scion that I want it to be very much like a TV show that's played in seasons. Every session we play is an episode, and every episode has its beginning, middle, and end. And theoretically, you should be able to come into an episode at the beginning, watch the whole thing, be entertained, and um, not have to watch from the episode one. But I mean, there are the whole overarching character arcs and overarching themes that do happen at the same time, um, which also do take in a you have to take into account. But like the labyrinth episode with you and Mr. Smith,
Yep.
that could easily have been over the course of like 3 or 4 episodes, like where you guys are just
Right.
trapped down there traveling around. But to kind of hurry it along, I had to pay strictly attention to time, because we were doing flashbacks. We were flashing from you and Mr. Smith to Crystal and Chris, who were doing their own kind of labyrinth on the other side. And
Yep.
we had to keep the parallels perfect, because at the culmination, at the end of the episode, we had to make sure everybody was in the same place at the right time with the right amount of story. So it kind of like drove people in. You want to drive people in to watch, even if they come in the middle. You're like, oh shit, someone just got shot in the face. What's going on? And they just kind of
Yeah.
you grab their attention and you hold it, and you're like, all right, now if you want to pay attention, like find out what happened before, you can go back and watch these old episodes, or you can progress forward to watch the rest. And that's kind of where I go with that.
Yeah, and like another thing I noticed watching other people's streams is um, if you slip up and you go even one episode without explaining what recurring characters look like, um, it's serious. It's genuinely like starting a book a third of the way in after they've already explained what all the characters, um, how they appear, because you don't know. They if they don't go over it again, you're just left with like completely like just silhouettes basically. So it's another thing I've been trying to be mindful of is to describe characters that the party might already know um, isn't sufficient. You should always explain the character in the context of visual explanations. Um, so like if it happens where like we would go full sessions without describing what anybody looks like. If somebody started from episode 15, they wouldn't know the director had green hair. Might not even know he's a gnome. It would just be they would just be like a bunch of I guess nondescript humanoids. Um, but even not even just that, but like the general theme in the setting, because you can establish it really well sometimes, but if it's not reinforced and if you don't constantly drive home like the mood of the show, it can sort of be lost. So like sometimes you have uh, a setting where things seem like really lighthearted and funny, but you're playing a horror game, so you have to like sort of reel people back in, even though the players might understand it. Uh, I think it could just be lost sometimes, because I've definitely had it where if I'm reading a book, and I'm not paying attention or I forgot, uh, I'll miss crucial things that aren't covered again that are just implied. Um, and then I'll reread it and be like, nope, I definitely read this book, almost the entire book, incorrectly because I missed some minor detail.
Right.
And you can't really rely on that, even for the sake of players, because you're invested in this thing 3 hours at a time for like 3 years. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly, but like in the same instance, like to describe the same character that you've described before, kind of it can get daunting. And I mean, I love describing things. I love giving a description about how the light falls from the ceiling in a crystalline structure, and how the roots wrap around gingerly of a fallen ivory pillar, and you can't tell the difference between the veins of marble and the roots themselves, things like that. Like I love just rambling off about that, setting a scene, and it's the small details for me that like really can push it on. But I like if I have to describe Nick one more time in game for
Yeah,
Scion, I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
Well,
No, yeah,
so I think that's where it for campaigns that are streamed, that character art comes into play,
right,
because like the header for Pathfinder now has all of the active characters on it, and so you can see, oh, there's a gnomish kind of squat character. He has green hair. That's weird. Oh, it's the director. He said he was a gnome.
right.
You know, and so forth. And now we've got Rune with one eye,
right.
and Monica's
Yeah,
on there now, and Reika's on there with her headdress and everything. It's pretty cool.
right. Yeah, but I have also noticed, like, as a player, if I don't actively reinforce the appearance of my player, and especially where it differs from the appearance of myself as a person, they sort of stop having a shape for me, and they start just becoming like unfeatured.
Mm-hmm.
So even as a player, I will reinforce um, like the red hair that Liam has, or
Mm-hmm.
like the mangled nose, or the weird bald head that Kane has, or like his portly
His portly,
stature.
that was the best
Yeah,
thing
and it's
ever.
just bringing it up over and over again keeps the character um, being different from me simulating being a character. And it's, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but um, it's definitely been like a huge new thing for me, is to like just constantly be repainting the picture
Mm-hmm.
of who the character is, because then it just puts me in the scene in a very different way.
Right. So I have one last thing that I want to talk about before we leave. Um, so as we're like winding down, have you ever like looked at the time, especially with being streaming, looked at the time during one of your sessions and saw how little time you have left, and had to have rushed things that you would have rather left like to have be longer, but you had to rush through them for the time constraint?
Yes, and I think where that gets the most stressful, because no hate on the players for having conversations, it's my favorite part of the game that I run. What makes that the most stressful is when character dialogue keeps almost ending and then picking back up. Where it's like, I have this one hook, it's going to take me 30 minutes, we're running out of time, and then like two players are talking, they're like, wait, before you go, there's something else I need to tell you. And I'm like, all right, come on, let's go. We've got a production schedule, guys. Just spill it.
Guilty.
I'm about to light the place on fire. It's like, it's a good scene, and there's no way of knowing that as a player, but it's just like, it's one of those things where I'm just like, oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few times like for me, like when running Scion, like I just kind of look at the clock, and I like you just lose time when you're playing, and like I
Um,
look at that like, oh man, it's 11:30. I start an hour earlier than people usually do. I need to wrap this up. Uh,
yeah.
so
That's also been I think my best games have all been the product of having far more encounters and interactions than I can actually fit into it. Because then what you do is, when you have a queue, when you have a bit of a backlog of like, oh, there were 8 things that were supposed to be in this session and none of them made it in yet, every single time the next step for the GM to make a decision about what's next, you pick the best choice. You're constantly just picking. It's like you're at
oh yeah,
the grocery store where you're like, what's the best apple I could pick right now? And
you
then you're
have
just constantly throwing out the absolute best option instead of running out and like having to improvise or
you have
something like that.
the list of stuff, and you just go down and you pick from it,
Yeah,
and whatever doesn't make it, you can kind of recycle and try to
right.
reuse later.
Like with the Minotaur, that was a jam-packed session. I'm sure you had plenty of stuff where you were like, this is cut for time.
Just a little bit.
And it became our best show for the Scion, I think.
I
It's a
enjoyed
good
it.
time.
That's all I have. Did you have anything
I'm
else?
I'm all set, man.
Do you have anything, Spence?
I feel like I'm woefully underprepared for Monday, so yeah.
I mean,
We'll cover you.
That's eventually you'll just get into the habit. You'll pick up things like every day now. I just kind of like write a little bit something on my phone, take it and put it in the book, in the binder, and then at the end of like probably Wednesday or Thursday next week, I'll go through, unify it all, put in details, and then just throw it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will probably be doing that tomorrow after Jen and I create her character, and then I will figure out how I'm going to torture you all, except for you, Ian, because you won't be there.
Mm.
You
I'll
jerk.
be sniping.
Yeah, well.
Ugh, Mr. Smith thinks we're fantastic.
Well,
I agree.
All right, guys. I'm pretty sure that we're all out of topics for this week anyway.
Yep.
So
Just wait till next show. We'll have a list.
a lengthy list.
Oh no.
well, because you'll have run 2 games, Ian, and Daniel and I will have run 1 each.
True that.
But we're gonna go ahead and get out of here and let you guys get off to bed. Thank you for coming and sticking around with us for our Friday night chat. We do appreciate it. I'm Daniel. I'm here a lot. Every other Monday with Star Wars, every other Friday with Scion, and the other Friday with a short rest, and every Sunday with Ian on Age of Ashes. Ian?
I'm Ian. I'm here Fridays, every other Monday, including this upcoming Monday, and Sundays for Pathfinder Age of Ashes. You should check it out. It's quite lovely, I think.
And our wonderful guest, Spence.
Hi, I'm Spence, and I live on the internet. So you can find me here on Sundays in our Age of Ashes campaign. Every other Monday, this coming Monday, for Static Dawn, Silicon Zion. And then you can find me on my Twitch stream, which is Resonant Moon. And I'm on Tuesday through Friday doing a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah.
All right. And so do make sure you guys come and check us out there at those times and see all what we have to offer. And we will see you guys around. Bye.